just curious, how many here have never bought a note before? Okay, this is awesome. How many of you have bought or owned notes but never sold a note? All right, yeah, nice. So you guys should connect and talk, and I'll have to walk out of the room, right? So one of the things with notes, just like real estate in general, there's due diligence. Real estate is a very big area. Note investing is a very niche of real estate. So on the paper side of real estate, we have a bunch of stuff we gotta get done. And I'm gonna cover some of that. But before we do that, a little bit about myself. In 2005, I started getting into rentals. Got in situations that I did not like, and situations that just didn't make me feel good. I got introduced to notes in 2010 from a friend of mine, who company blew up to billions of dollars in assets, which was great. But then I said, I gotta do this myself. I came to find out that valuing assets is only part of due diligence. There's a whole other part of it that I didn't know. So we started buying notes in 2012. And with buying notes, for me, it was a game. I'm trying to figure things out. But what I didn't have was the opportunity to learn from others. And the network of people, especially in the room, to learn their strengths. Learn people's strengths and see how you can piggyback off each other. Everyone has a skill set outside notes they can apply to notes, oddly enough. So we went ahead and bought our first note for $5,500. I think it made like 300 bucks on it. However, what you learn quickly is you went to school. So if you make $1 or break even or lose all your money, it's to me like going to college, right? You walk into school with student loan debt, you walk out with debt, and you have education. Well, here, go to school. However, if you are someone like myself that wants to dot all I's, cross all T's, we're going to go through some of the due diligence parts that I've learned over the years. So in 2014, we had a local RIA meeting for note investors. There was like 8 of us. And I said, we gotta get on social media. So there wasn't any Facebook groups, all that stuff. So I created one for a local group, which then blew up. We have 2,600 members, we post regularly, we do webinars, all that good stuff. And for us, it's about networking, connecting people. This space is extremely small. So understand the fact that nationwide, everyone knows each other. So in 2015, I formed my JKP Holdings. I was buying personally before that. I don't recommend doing it, but I didn't know any better. I just went ahead and did it what I wanted to do. So I started doing webinars, local, and then they went national, where people wanted to jump on the Zoom calls. And that's when I started getting into Zoom. And that's when we started learning things. I started learning from other people. So it was really helpful for me. In 2019, I formed my other company, JKP Solutions, which is a due diligence side of my business that I created based on what I already do internally, but made it for the public to look at. So what is preliminary due diligence? Well, due diligence is the ability to figure out if the asset is a good asset, but there's different parameters that you have to figure out, right? So does the numbers make sense? Numbers meaning, what return do you want? We're talking outside about this. When you're looking at numbers, if you don't know what return you want, figure it out first, right? If you don't know your returns, you need to know what return makes you happy, right? I've heard people say, well, I don't care. Well, how about if I give you 1%? Well, that doesn't work, right? What return works for you? That may mean you're borrowing money. Maybe you're borrowing money at 5, you need to make 6. Maybe 10% works, maybe 15. Whatever works for you, you want to work with that. Now, don't go off your perimeters. That's why everyone has a buy box, right? It's a general stage. FinTech has their buy box as well. They don't go off of it. So you want to look at that kind of stuff. So if you haven't heard before, a tape is just a list of addresses and the data of the note. Notes all math, right? The numbers all added for, like Kevin talked about before, they all add up together. They all figure each other out. All the numbers work. So you need to figure out, take this list of assets and say what works for me. Performing, not performing, all the good stuff. So you need to figure out what works for you, but you need to look at the fact and figure out what works for you based on the returns you want. You're gonna start building big calculators. Now you can go get one online, but you need to work on building your own so you understand how it works, so you can adjust it over time, add things to it. Believe me, the one I had in 2012 looks nothing like the one I have today, right? It's so much bigger, better, and I'm gonna constantly make adjustments on it. And it should be something you work with. Now you can use one online to start off with, but you need to understand what you're looking at so you can make adjustments as you go along. So when you get this list of assets, you're gonna run numbers and figure out what deals you want. And you're gonna start making mistakes and asking questions. Great. Post questions. Ask questions socially. Ask people you know. Email people. Start asking and figure things out. So when you go look at an asset, one of the things is the property value. Now, sellers provide you with a BPO, right? I'm not big on BPOs. When I first got started, I worked for a hedge fund and we had to buy BPOs. They're big, big time where you need to buy 1,000 loans and you need BPOs. It's a quick, easy way of doing it. However, for small investors like yourselves, you're gonna find out BPOs sometimes are inaccurate for many reasons. So I personally like to go ahead and reach out to BPO or REO agents, right? Or investors locally to get local knowledge, to talk to someone on the phone, right? If you're buying small, 1, 2, 3, even 10 notes, you can reach out to these people and find out more information about that local property. So I'd like to do that to get a value of the property, get a local eyes and ears on that property, know the area, know the information. As a first-time investor, that's key. So property value is an idea of estimate. You're not gonna know full value. There's no interior knowledge for the most part on assets, right? If it's occupied, you're not gonna get interior. So what we find out is that we can get values from things like Zillow and Realtor and all stuff, but then we want to base it off that number first. So you really want to just get an idea, look at the map, get a value what you think it's worth, and present to your seller with that number in mind. With your fact that if you do have a non-performer and you have to foreclose on it, you have your expenses, right? But you want to have that number in mind. You can tell a seller, hey, I base this on a value of X, Y, Z. Now if that number drops, and you thought it was worth 100 and it's worth 50, you can go back to the seller and listen, it's not worth what I thought it was worth, you saw it was worth 100, but however, this local BPO or agent says it's only worth 50, here's comps to prove it, right? And you can justify it, right? I know from the fund level we used to do is we do 2 BPOs, a high one, a low one. I'm sure you know which one we gave out. So we want to look at stuff like that, but we want to take our preliminary due diligence quick and easy. We don't want to dive too much time. I'm not going to be ordering BPOs and all this different stuff now. Why? You're not going to always get every deal you make an offer on get accepted. You want a preliminary and make an indicative offer. Those who are brick and mortar real estate don't understand this at all. What do you mean you make an indicative offer? Like, you mean you don't have all the information? No. We make indicative offers based on a bunch of different points, right? Collateral review and all this kind of stuff, liens. Because the tape doesn't have what the delinquent tax amount is most of the time, right? Value is subjective. So you really want to get this information and just send it to the seller and get, if the bid's accepted, great. So one of the other features when you're buying non-performers is an annual tax amount. Why do we care about annual taxes, right? If we're buying a non-performer and you're buying in New Jersey or buying in Texas, annual taxes mean a whole lot. Why? New Jersey, foreclosures between 12 and 18 months if it's occupied kind of property. And if you're in New Jersey and you have a $30,000 annual taxes, guess what you have to pay at the foreclosure auction? The tax bill to make it current. If it took you 18 months, guess what your bill is at the end? Now if that property's in Texas and your property tax bill is $1,000 a year, or $2,000, $3,000 a year, guess what your bill is at the end of 60 days, 90 days, right? A lot cheaper. So annual tax is a big factor for me in my calculations to figure out if I'm gonna have to spend 18 months, what is my cost as part of my expense? So annual tax amount, I have to get in my preliminary due diligence. It makes me allow my bid calculator to figure out what I should bid on if this thing stops performing. Any question about that, feel free to interrupt me and back up and all that good stuff. If I use an acronym, feel free to jump in and ask questions, right? So when we look at stuff like this, these are the preliminary things we need to know what we're gonna do with if the bid's accepted. Understand the fact that there's a lot of indicatives, right? The collateral file, which we'll get to in a minute, that's indicative. Everything else is indicative. The only thing you're really looking at is a property value estimated. You're also looking at the note deal. Why does the note deal matter? As Kevin said before, there's a huge calculator you can use, the HP calculator. I use spreadsheets. You can do the same thing. And the interest rate alone. I'm gonna tell you right now, if the loan's at 2%, you're trying to buy it at 10 yield, the numbers are really hard to do. And as you play with the calculator, you're gonna find out why a 2% loan is hard to buy if your goal is at 10 yield, because you have to discount it so much more. And if the loan's at 10%, guess what your discount is? 0. Because it's already at 10. So sometimes people go on there and look at tapes and say, hey, anything lower than a 5%, I'm gonna skip. Why? Because I have to discount too much and the seller won't accept it. One of the common questions we get is, what happens if the seller rejects it and I bid way too low? I'm gonna tell you, most likely, nothing. You're better off doing something like that. What you shouldn't do is make an offer and go, whoa, you know what, the numbers weren't what I thought they were. The numbers are on the sheet, right? You'll get blacklisted for making offers you didn't close on, faster than if, hey, listen, here's what's going on, right? So when you're making an offer to your seller, make sure your numbers make sense. And this is all based on your calculations. On a performing loan, it's real easy. It's just your performing numbers. If it's a 10% loan and there's no, you're grossing 10, you look for out servicing fees, all that good stuff, you could bid 100% of UPB in that case. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing it, right? Because if they pay off tomorrow, you're not making any money on it. However, you can do that. On a loan that's 2 and 3, it's really difficult. Does that make sense, everyone? Awesome. So, when we make this offer to our seller, it's extremely indicative. As you get through this process, you're gonna start realizing your mistakes. And what you can do in the community, which is awesome, is ask questions. Hey guys, what do you think of my offer here? What do you think of this? What do you think? The community is so helpful for each other. It's amazing. So, and if you're not sure about something, you're gonna get 16 answers. What happens? That's why I created the Facebook group, for the opportunity for multiple people to respond. And you're gonna tell who's been in the business for a while, you'll see the conversation going on. So, what I typically do is I get information, I have a portal I use that I can pull this data together. Bedrooms, bathrooms, square footages. One of the key items are things like last listed price and date. Because if the property's been listed for sale 3 months ago and got taken off the market, I can look at property pictures. I can see inside the property. I can call the agent and play dumb. Hey, I saw you had a property sale. What was going on there? What could happen? Well, it's not listed for sale. Yeah, what was going on there? Just play dumb. Oh, well, you know, that person had a problem with the mortgage. I called back up. Oh, okay. Or, hey, listen, it took up the market. They said they're going to move out and the house is wrecked. They can't do anything. Oh, okay. You play dumb, right? That's some of the ways we do it. In my portal, when I pull this data down, I can see if it's been listed for sale. I can see the fact that the loan went into foreclosure and it started a process in 2004. And what happened here? What went on that helped me know, and I can tell the seller, right? When we look at something like this, that's the indicative before offer. That's the easy part. So once you make your offer is when you can get an accepted offer. That's when the butterflies probably will kick in for you guys. Holy goodness, I made an offer and the seller accepted it. What do I do now? Well, everyone here will do it a little bit differently, right? I do it different from a lot of people. Doing it as long as I've been doing it, my system works for me, doesn't mean it's gonna work for you. So one of the big things is you need to do some kind of property drive-by. Why? We use a thing called Google Walk-in. We used to Google walk a property and see what it looked like, just quick eyes. Well, in 2013, we were looking at a property in Miami, saw some guy on the steps sitting there, probably looked good. Happened to just turn the corner to see the back view, to see what was in the backyard, the house is gone. Whoa, what happened? Well, guess what? The property got demolished and the Google photo was a couple years old. So we said, ooh, you need to get someone on eyes and ears just to look at the property and see what it looks like, what kind of condition it is. And you really want to just say, just tell me what you see. Don't tell me what you think. I don't want your thoughts, just tell me what you see, right? You know, bad condition doesn't tell me anything. That tells me nothing. So you can get a BPO done, and they'll show pictures on the BPO. They'll show property pictures. Now, you can go get a BPO. Again, I'd rather reach out to an agent. I have 10,000 REO agents I reach out to in no local places and say, listen, I want to know, here's your local information, and then I'm gonna pay you for a drive-by. BPOs are typically done by either a BPO agent or some administrator that goes out and takes pictures and they run EVM. I want to talk to an agent who knows the area, or an investor, or both, right? If you're gonna buy a property in your backyard, who will you call? Yourself, because you know the area. So I want to talk to someone, or get a hold of someone who's an expert in that area. So you're gonna get information. The next thing we typically order is what we call an ownership encumbrance report, O&E report. What the O&E report is like a mini title report. For those who are familiar with title reports, it shows you what happened in the past. Well, when a notice originated, they do what they call a title policy. What that says is an insurance policy that says there's no other liens and it's free and clear, which is great. From the point it got sold to now, what's happened. So that's when O&E comes in. That tells you what other liens been added to it, what delinquent taxes are, to a point, right? If it's delinquent but tax sale, that's a little different, right? So you look at stuff. It also encompasses things like IRS liens, utility liens, other mortgages. And usually it also includes any kind of foreclosure documents and your assignments and allonges and all that stuff, assignments, mortgages and all that good stuff. All there. Great. So when we do that kind of stuff, we're reviewing to see what the taxes are. If there's a second mortgage on there. Why do I care from a first position for a second mortgage? Well, I can't deed in lieu of property and take that because it's subject to a second, right? The property still has liens on it. So I can't typically foreclose. There's other ways around it, but generally speaking, you're stuck in a situation you have to make sure you foreclose on the whole property and you have to wipe the whole thing clean. You can't just do a deed in lieu, meaning avoid foreclosure. So we want to make sure everything's there. We also want to see whether documents may be filed, right? We check that kind of stuff out. When we're looking at liens, IRS liens, now IRS has a time frame when they reinstate or buy back the loan. What you find out is that they very, very, very rarely ever do that. But they have a redemption period. They can redeem stuff. I honestly, personally, never seen them do it. And usually it's done for like big person who has a bunch of properties and they want to get the attachment to the other stuff. So what we want to look is the O&E just to verify numbers, see what it looks like, see what it is. What we typically do is that O&E report gets sent to our attorney or our collateral management company to see what it looks like. So, which we'll get to in a second, your O&E is one piece of the puzzle. Your property condition value is another piece. So you're getting eyes and ears on that property. You're not guesstimating what the value is. Next, what I often do, if I'm unsure about a property, I'll start Facebooking LinkedIn people, right? Now, when you scale, you're not gonna be able to do this stuff. But in the beginning, this is great, right? I, one time in 2014, was on Facebook, looked at the name, found some 18-year-old kid walked to his house and the property, rapping on YouTube, or Facebook. Guess what it told me? I can see the entire of the property. I can see the condition of the property. This is great, right? It was in perfect condition. I'm buying that thing, right? And it said there, I hope my mom gets better out of the hospital soon. Now I know what happened. Mom got sick. It was awesome information. They didn't know they shared it, right? One thing I will caveat is when you are working with these agents, or if you are doing a BPO, if you do speak to agents, you cannot disclose what the status of this loan is, right? You can't say the default. The information of the borrower cannot be given out. All you want to know is local information about this property. So when you do reach out, you're just trying to get an idea of the value. That's why typically I don't work with other agents, because when I explain what I'm doing, a lot of them say, well, it's not for sale. I don't get what you're doing. Like, they don't understand it. And it takes me time to explain what that means. So in turn, I just want to know knowledge, right? One question I had before was, how do we know it's occupied or vacant? There's some tricks of the trade, right? Occupied and vacant, there's two sides of the coin, which one's better, which one's worse. For an occupied property, they may fight you in the foreclosure. They may file BK, right? But they also may reinstate their loan. If it's vacant, they may deed in lieu to you and get it over. Or the property may be in really bad shape. Maybe been destroyed, who knows, flooded, whatever. So there's all kind of flip sides. Any questions so far on those two topics? No? Wow, this is easy. All right. So right now we're in the point of looking at the property and looking at everything else, and look at the borrower. Because the borrower is the key. Not as much as seconds, right? Second lien is a little bit more about the borrower than the first. First is more about the property. I want to know about the property. What's the condition of the property? What's the value of the property? If I have to go to a foreclosure auction, can I sell this property? What can I sell it for? Right? Because the auction tells me everything. If I'm going to an auction and I'm upside down, I got to worry about it. Okay? Equity is a big thing with foreclosure auctions. If that product worth $100,000 and my UPB is 50, do we know how much money we can get at foreclosure auction? What happens if it sells for 100,000? Guess who gets the 50 grand? Do you get it if you only owed 50,000? You're only owed what you're owed, right? And if you want to make an offer, guess what you have to do? You have what we call credit bidding, right? You bid up to your number, and you have to add more dollars to it to actually get into the bidding plan. Because technically you're only owed 50,000, given numbers, okay? So when we're looking at stuff like this, that's the kind of stuff you have to be knowledgeable. Overwhelming, yes. But I'm gonna tell you, I started with no education, no trainings, and just dove in and played with the stuff. You can get all the trainings in the world, but we talked last night about it, you can't just educate yourself to oblivion. Dive in, and then surround yourself with other people who know what they're doing, and ask questions. Feed, what do I not know? What should I look at? How should I follow through? So, you know, we will oftentimes in our webinars, we'll bring on new investors to show people what they're doing. Because you'll learn from someone who just bought 2 or 3 loans. It's not better than you'll learn from us, right? Because they're in your playing field versus where we've been doing it for years. So what we want to then do is we want to go to the next step, which is the collateral file. Does anyone know what's inside a collateral file and what's between a soft and a hard copy? All right. So do you know you get an electronic copy of the file sent to you, right? Soft collateral. It's not hard collateral, it's literally a physical piece of paper. And that collateral file, believe it or not, I didn't believe when I first saw it, it's actually the signature of the borrower. I didn't think I'd get that for some reason when I first got into it. I said, holy goodness, this thing's signed by the borrower. It's pretty cool. Wet ink. So you're gonna get that hard file. But before you get the hard file, you're gonna get electronic version of it. And that electronic version allows you to see if the collateral file is foreclosable. Meaning, is it legal situation that the borrower defaults, you can foreclose on the file. Can you do that? If it's not, why? What do you need to fix it? And if it's unfixable, then you're gonna avoid it. In the beginning, you may avoid all problems. But I'm gonna tell you, as you get better and get your network of people, solving those problems is the key. You're gonna outbid people because people avoid problems. If you can solve the legal problems, it's a great key. And the attorneys in the field, what we'll often do is either send to a collateral management service or company, you can send to an attorney, you can send to your servicer, until you get to the point where you can review collateral yourself. You can review it yourself, but most people say, listen, I don't want to do that in case I make a mistake. Fine. Your attorney can do it. They'll read collateral file for $200 or so, depending on your relationship and what state it's in. Because in due diligence and notes, every state is different. And the state laws change regularly, right? You may be in a situation where you're looking to buy in Illinois and you don't have a license in Illinois. Do you know you can't technically own a note without a license? No, I didn't know that. So those little things you need to learn as you go through it are where states I can buy in, what states I can't buy in, that I don't have a debt license. There's certain states that as long as you have a service rate, it's all good. Some states don't care as much, right? Those are the kind of things you get into. But I review my collateral file with an attorney or some kind of person who understands collateral. Make sure the chain is there. What is the chain of collateral? Well, it originates with the originator, right? If you ever originate a note, you know you're the originator. Well, that note can be sold from one person to another. Well, what happens if it goes from A to B to E? Well, the chain is not complete. Well, you need to prove how did you get that note in your hands. So you need to show that chain completed. The collateral file should show it. What happens if it doesn't? Well, then you need to fix it, right? And sometimes you don't know. There's murders and all that stuff. We won't get into murders, but if it doesn't connect, it's not a foreclosable file. You need to make sure you can correct it, right? And I'm gonna tell you right now, you're not gonna always, you go say, oh, the chain doesn't look complete. Sometimes it's okay, right? And without getting the weeds, that's why in the beginning, work with your collateral management companies, work with your attorney and say, is this a good file? Let them be the experts. You be the expert investor, you be the expert money guy or girl, and let your servicers do their job, and let your attorneys do their job. Lean on the people you know and the resources you have to tell you what you are missing. Pay the money to do that. Why? If you start doing this halfway and you get in trouble, guess what happens? You're lost, right? And then you feel frustrated. So reach out. Anyone have an attorney in XYZ state? It happens all the time in a Facebook group. Yep, I got this person, right? And one of the things we also do is we encourage you to network with each other, and if someone else lives in that property area, ask them who they use, right? When you're looking at a collateral file, you often have your mortgage, right? We often say mortgage notes, they're two different instruments. Most people don't realize that, right? Your mortgage, your note, you have your longes and your assignments, right? And your title policy. One of the big things that I shared last night that isn't talked about in the space much, one of the best ways to find sources is actually look at a collateral file. Why? You can look up the chain and say, who owned it before Kevin did? Oh, it was owned by Bob Smith. Hey, I'm gonna go to Bob Smith and see if he has assets for sale, right? I don't have to go to Kevin and go to Bob Smith. Great. What I would tell you is if it says Bank of America on it, you're not gonna call your local branch and ask for the mortgage department and say, can I buy loans from you? They'll kind of laugh at you and cross their eyes and say, whoa. So believe me, I've tried that in like 2012. I'm like, oh, I'm a TD Bank, you know? And they laugh at you, right? There are people out there that try reaching out to banks to buy loans. It's very difficult, right? And I won't get into the weeds why it is, I can explain later, but it's extremely difficult. So sourcing note's a big deal. When you look at the collateral file, you need to make sure the chain is complete, and your attorney can help you do that. They'll use your O&E report we've talked about before, and your collateral file to see if everything matches, right? Everything in the county record has to be recorded. Your mortgage is recorded, and your assignments and mortgage are recorded. That's your chain. It just transfers the mortgage, the lien, your mortgage, your lien, to transfer the lien to you. The lien is transferred to you correctly, it's all good. It's wonderful. Now you have a situation, collateral file is missing some stuff. You can work with your attorney, you can work with your network, and get that fixed. Most of the time, it's not a problem, right? So when we go through this thing, we're gonna then bring it to our servicer and get that boarded, they call it, which is just putting it with the servicer and they wrap it all together, right? One thing with the collateral file you look at is it doesn't always come nice and pretty. I got over getting frustrated when people sing you all kinds of different things all over the place. Just take the time and organize it. Going from A to B to B to C and just organize it that way. Because you want to see the chain. You want to make sure it's complete. If it's not complete or you're missing something, go back to the seller. Hey, I'm missing this. We were looking at a deal this week, we're going to buy, and it's missing an assignment, right? Once you get in the space, I know exactly who it is. We're going to go call them up and say, listen, can you fix a forbearance agreement that you signed in 2013? I'll make it happen. And great thing about that is you can go back to your seller and say, hey, this is going to cost me $1,000 to fix. Can I get it off the bill? And most times it's not worth my hassle. Go ahead and do it. Great. And always a phone call. So when we have our chain of command assignments, the connection is crucial, right? That chain tells you who owned it. That chain has to be completed. This also has to do with your servicer notes and your pay history, right? Especially if you're getting a bankruptcy court, which can happen. You know, if you're not familiar with pacer.gov, get familiar with it, right? Take some time. Pacer.gov is a site you can use to look up bankruptcy records of a borrower. So pacer.gov is a site. I think I have it, you can, down the bottom here, yep. Check Pacer. So when you're checking Pacer, it's overwhelming at first, right? You're not sure where to look at. There's different, you can go on YouTube, I'm sure people have done it, I'm sure maybe we've done a webinar on it. And Pacer.gov just tells you what borrowers have filed bankruptcy, what was the bankruptcy plan, what's the terms, right? How many times? Because the worst thing you want to do, this happened to one of our friends, bought a property in Florida. It was going to foreclosure, filed BK, stopped the foreclosure auction. BKs do that, right? Well, guess what? Got to the plan date, never filed a plan. What happens then? You bought the loan, and then we get in a situation. They maybe get a hold of you, they make one payment and never pay you again. They can go back in bankruptcy. When you go to foreclosure auction, they file again, and they get repeated. There are ways to get out of bankruptcy, but some states are harder than others to fight. I know it was 3 times in like 2 years in Florida, and the judge threw out the case. Actually threw out the request to block the BK. So BK is a situation you need to know. Because sometimes BKs are awesome, really cool. Why? Your E&I payment is what you receive. Well, guess what happened with a bankruptcy plan? There's additional arrears that can get paid out for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. And that payment is on top of the P&I. So you could buy it, get your arrears, and sell it in 4 years and make the money. Arrears is typically not something added in the purchase of a loan. Sellers typically don't look at that and say, hey, it's additional yield number. They don't. So if it's in PACER, you can see this number and increase your yield. So remember, yield's your annual return to maturity date, right? Caveat, if you're planning on holding a loan for 20 years, yield's good. If you're not planning to hold a loan for 20, 30 years, yield's something you have to work with, right? If you're only looking to hold a loan for 5 years, a 20-year note, what's your return in 5 years? You can get to more of the math. That's the data number guy, right? All IRR stuff. So big caveat with the fact that your calculator should figure out if this thing sells in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, your return will go up because you're not waiting the whole 20 years. So the bankruptcy history on the bankruptcy court is important. If there's no file for them, doesn't mean they can't file, but tells you the fact that they haven't, especially not performing. Performing assets are really good, right? But understand that most sellers say, well, it's performing for 3 years. Great. In my world, every loan is great until it's not, right? So I always bid on my worst case scenario. Now, I'm gonna tell you other investors say, no, I'm not worried about it, performing for 3 years, I don't care. And I bid on yield, which is wonderful. However, I don't wanna be that person. I'm a little bit more conservative with that. I bid on the fact that if I have to foreclose on it, am I still okay? And remember, foreclosure, there's 2 different exit strategies. If it sells at auction, or if it doesn't. If there's equity in the property, it's probably gonna sell at auction. If it's underwater, you're probably gonna take it back. And if you take it back, you can sell as is, you can rent it, all of those extra strategies come out. But when you're in a situation where BK's involved, you need to know what they're doing. If they're not paying, they're making payments. If they are making the payments, right? And inside the file, it tells you there are additional expenses, car, leases, other things going on. What do they owe? And what they owe, it tells you a lot about them. Seconds use a lot to know the fact that if they can make their $300 car payment, why are they not making their payment on their second, right? I primarily buy first, but I have bought seconds as well. But I've been in the first base for as many years I've been doing this. And the reason being is it just fits me. Know your niche, know what you like, but first learn what you know, right? First and seconds are different animals. Any questions about PACER, due diligence right now? Or are we just waking up after lunch? So,
Dave,
yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
When you go to order an ONE report, there are a bunch of options, right? Current owner, 2-year, full, and then there are usually the options. What about unreported liens? Like, how does anyone find out about unreported liens?
So the question is, when you order an O&E report, there's different options, current owner, 2 owners, and there's additional liens to be found, right? How do you know which one to pick? Well, remember the O&E report tells you what the current, since purchase of the house, what's happened since then, right? So we want just current owner. You don't need to buy 2, go back 30 years. Because your title policy protects you. If there are additional liens, you technically file a title policy, file a claim on a title policy, and collect your own UPB, right? It's a great situation. So if you want to find unclaimed liens, the process of them doing it is extremely difficult. And sometimes it's not always accurate, right? One of the most common companies we use is ProTitle. There are other companies out there. We use a couple of different companies, but ProTitle USA is a normal space O&E report place. When you're buying these reports, you want to make sure that the O&E report has these unclaimed liens if they can find them. However, I would still advise you, as a new investor, to go out there and call the county records to see what it is. One of the reasons is, delinquent taxes show 0. However, did someone buy it at a tax sale? Is there a tax sale there? So I want to find out, maybe delinquent tax is 0, but maybe someone else owns it, right? And I'm gonna have to pay them off because they're above me in the chain of my lien. Taxes are always above my first position, right? They're always first, they have to pay out first. So that's a big thing for us. So with the O&E report, it tells me that kind of things, but I'm not gonna always hold it for truth 100%. I gotta double check. So, awesome question though. So all these little things we do is over time learning. We talked yesterday about the fact that you need to have your network of investors around you to ask these questions. Does anyone have a checklist? Does anyone have questions? So we actually put a list together of 14 items we always, 13 items we always ask sellers. Things like servicing notes. Why are servicing notes important? One of the reasons servicing notes is, tells me a little bit about the borrower. What's happened? Did they call up with a problem? Did they actually tell me what's going on? Did someone get hurt? Another little cool trick, and it's happened before, is I bought a loan one time, and I'm not naming names, and there was a agreement for a modification on the loan. Within a week before I bought it. Confirmed with the seller that there was no mod. After finding out there was a mod happen, servers were screwed up. Worked out with the seller, all good. But I've also been in situations where the servicing notes tells me there was a property inspection done on this 3 months ago. Me, the seller, a buyer, I want that property inspection report. Why? Pictures, property condition, right? Especially the lockbox on it. Who put the lockbox on it? If it's in the north, has it been winterized? If it's been vacant, have they winterized it? If they winterized it, let me see the pictures, because that gets the inside, right? Those kind of servicing notes is really crucial. Pay history, can show you the history. How consistent were they? Did they skip months? Skipping months is not always bad. Maybe they're a real estate agent and they make commission every 3 months. Whatever it is. So just gotta see where they're at. One of the other things we look at is a thing called forced place insurance or a lender's place insurance. There's 2 different policies. So without getting in the weeds, one type of insurance policy, when you buy it, you cannot file a claim on, the other one you can. One of the things I ask for. But I'm also asking to make sure, I want to ask for everything so they can give it to me. Foreclosure documents. If they can give it to me, I want them, right? BK, if they have any kind of BK, just give me the bankruptcy PACER ID number and I go on PACER and look at it, right? I ask for everything. Let them say, no, I don't have it. Or, that's not applicable. That's fine. Let them tell me no. I want to ask for everything. One of the other things I ask for is to see if the borrower has asked for anything, any requests, weird requests, anything in there. I want to see everything in there, right? Because they'll send you as little as possible because it's easier for them and not worth it for them. How many times I've said, listen, I see a property inspection, but we don't give that out. And it may be legit, but my ears go, why aren't you giving me this? What about the property you hide? They may not hide anything, maybe part of the protocol, but I ask that question. Now I make a decision, right? Some places don't even give a servicing notes out. That bothers me. I know there's a couple of servicers out there that do not give out their servicing notes. To me, that doesn't make me feel comfortable. You may be okay with it, right? But as an investor, you want to see everything. You want to know as much as you can about this note and this borrower as you possibly can, especially if you're bringing outside money. Okay. Another thing we ask for in our items is any kind of valuation that they've done. I want to see where they got their number from. I've been sent a picture of Zillow. This is where I got a number from Zillow. Great. So if my value comes in different, you can't argue me, can you? Because my value is just as crazy as your number, why not? So I often say, listen, I have a local agent who gave me a hard number on this. And sellers will say, don't care, or they may go back and forth, right? It depends how big they are. You're gonna make the most profit right now off of other investors who need to get out for some reason. So ask questions, right? Institutional people are gonna go right to FINRA and get their loan sold for a good price. Small investors just want to get their loan sold and they want nothing to do with it. They don't understand all the world. People who originate notes now, they don't even know how to sell the notes. I was talking to a gentleman before, I originated, I didn't know a note could be sold. Great, let me teach you, right? I'm gonna give you an offer and we're gonna walk you through it. Because guess what? We're gonna walk through it. You have any more notes? Oh yeah, I got 40 more. Great, let's work together. Let's make these numbers work. And they love you because they can recoup everything. especially if they can do partials, right? Partials is a nice rule game. Partials is a lot less due diligence because I don't gotta go through all this. I do, because who I am, and all that stuff. So when you go through the process, you really wanna start with the data sheet that they're giving you. If a person's not able to give you a data sheet, you need to make sure you have all the numbers, right? You need to make sure the numbers make sense. Starting with the P&I, your interest rate, your next due date, your maturity date, and things like this. Why? We looked at a loan last week where the numbers didn't add up. Why is that a big deal? Well, the P&I didn't equate to what the numbers were. It was the modifications they forgot about, which actually pushed the maturity date out, which was wrong on the date. What in fact the number of loans, the payment periods left is different, which drastically reduced my yield. Well, then I can't buy it. If I was not paying attention, I would have bought that note. Another issue people don't realize is they bid based on UPB, unpaid principal balance. Why is this a problem? Math, notes are math, right? It's not simple. So if you bid on a loan, I've done this video before, on a 2% loan or 8% loan, and you bid them both the same, your returns are drastically different, right? I used to do this. I have a loan at 5.5% that I can never get rid of. Who's gonna buy it, right? It's sitting there and it will sit there forever. When you buy these kind of loans, you need to look at these numbers. But then you need to work with the team around you, your servicers, your attorneys, your O&A people, your collateral management companies, and your investor friends. We're all colleagues here, we're competitive, but at the same time, we're also there to help each other, right? Any parts of this stuff confusing, we want to rehash, because I have a few minutes left, but I wanted to see where you guys are at with your thoughts. What part of due diligence have you got stuck at, right? This is something I do regularly in my breathing of stuff. I've automated a lot of my processes, but not everything can be automated, right? Your collateral management file, I would not recommend you looking at it and reviewing it on your own the first time, right? I can do it, but most of the time I'll send it to my attorney anyway, just to make sure nothing laws changed, because laws change in states, right? Your servicer, you need to make sure your servicer is licensed in the state that the loan is in. Why is that a problem? Many investors got a letter a couple months ago that said that they no longer can service their loan, and then the loan had to be transferred immediately. They need to be licensed in that state. So, can you get your servicer after you buy your note? Yes, you can. I did it, right? How do we know what states servicers are at? Reach out. I can give you a link to what we have available, and you can see what states servicers are in. For those who don't know what servicers are, but you know what property managers are, servicer is your property manager for notes. If you have a mortgage payment, you get a little piece of paper that's sent by your servicer. Even if it says GMAC on it, they have a servicing branch. That's your servicer. That's who sends out the yearly statement and your monthly statements. Does that make sense? Okay. So, when you go through this due diligence period, numbers of the property, the borrower, the collateral file, the details of everything is really, really crucial. We've been in spots where when we read collateral files, we don't, I was looking at one recently where they did an assignment of deed on a note. There's a new investor, said, oh, that makes sense. Me, I'm like, that makes no sense at all, right? Because there's a thing called contract for deeds out there, which is like a lease option, which is getting kind of pushed out, Ohio's pushing it out, which is basically a lease option to get the deed once you stop, you're finished making payments. But while the lender owns the deed, like a car payment, right? Well, this isn't that, it's a mortgage, which means that the assignment of mortgage has to be filed, not assignment of deed. Back to the seller, here's a problem. Also, we had a problem where the forbearance agreement wasn't signed by the seller, the previous seller. What do you do then? Well, you make sure they're in business, right? Those kind of things. But when you first started, you're not gonna know these little things. You're not gonna know to look at that stuff. Go ahead.
I know it ranges from state to state, but what would be like the range in price for all this?
So for the collateral review,
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you that my pricing is different from yours, right? But you can pay $150 to $250 a file typically for them to review it. It is well worth it for you guys to feel good that attorney who says later, I can't foreclose on it. I said, what do you mean? You read the file, right? They read it over, they understand it, to make sure the numbers work out and stuff. So it ranges. Remember, every state is different for the timeframes, right? Pricing. So there is a Fannie Mae price for attorneys to file foreclosures in every state, and they publish it. I have it available, if anyone wants it, also as well. And they publish it every so often. It's not regular, that I've ever seen, but they publish their fees. Understand that that's only part of the cost to foreclose. That's just the legal cost. There's court costs, there's the publication costs, sheriff costs, right? All those things come into play. And you have redemption period per state. Means the borrower can redeem the note, the mortgage, right? They can redeem it and get it back after a certain period of time. Every state's different, right? Statute of limitations is another thing. You're not gonna know it, right? When you first get started, every state's statute of limitations is different. I've, over the years, asked my attorneys to give me the update on statute of limitations every year. So I have a huge lookup table that tells me this. What's frustrating is, I have 4 or 5 attorneys in all the states, and they give me different numbers. Like, oh no. And you reach out to them and say, why? Oh, it depends. Why? I'll give you an example, Alabama, right, 12-month redemption. Unless the mortgage is originated after January 1st, 2016. Well, crazy. Well, how am I gonna remember that? So there's a little caveats that matters, right? I always get this. But you wanna know your general costs. Remember, this is generally based on the fact that the borrower does not contest the file, or you can be in a situation where you may be $15,000 in legal before you blink an eye, if they contest it. It can happen, right? When we're looking at stuff with attorneys, I'm gonna be surprised if you run into an attorney that you don't personally like. Because most attorneys in here, unless it's a big warehouse attorney, they're generally cool and relaxed. They like working with us, they like talking to us. And they don't charge every 15 minutes. That's not the way they work, right? These kind of people. Now, one thing about due diligence is getting into the servicer. We were talking last night, your servicer is not your investor-friendly person. They don't answer questions of your, hey, you think I should do this? They're not that person, right? They're there to collect the money. So that's what their job is. This is the preliminary due diligence stuff. This is before you make the offer, you want to check your tape numbers, make sure you know your return. We're talking back, if you don't know your buy box, get it. What return do you want? What kind of property do you want? Is your goal to get the property back? Is your goal situation where you want property values of like $5 grand? Or do you want that $300,000, right? What kind of buy box do you have? What return do you target? Now you don't have to tell your seller I want 10%, but you better know it, right? I buy in 12 states, I buy property between $50,000 and $300,000 property values in these states. Will I buy in California? If the number's good, right? Will I buy in Jersey, where I'm from? If the number's good. One of my best deals I bought was in Jersey. Why? The seller thought the property was 50 grand and worth 190. Did I get a deal on that? Yep. I knew the value of the property. I was local. Bought it for $30,000, sold for $180. Foreclosed on it, it was actually 2 months left in foreclosure. Great situation, great profit. But there's also other sides of it. Does it make sense? Okay. What other stages of foreclosures or due diligence do you guys often get confused on? I understand tapes are confusing, but I'm not gonna dive into tapes because it really matters. One of the most frustrating parts of getting into space is your tape is different from every seller. One of my partners that I met in 2016 got with me, he's an ex-Wall Street guy, and he said to me, well, just give me what the format is. I've had sellers, the same seller give me 2 different formats. Why? So I created a pivot table, and it's overwhelming, right? So you need to know what those headers mean. What's the difference between the next payment due date and the last payment due date and the last payment received? Those are 3 different fields. So you got a question?
Yeah, any advice on looking up taxes, bad taxes, and tax lien sales? Because every state, every county is different.
So one of the ways you can do is, there is no, I started automating this. I'm a big, if anyone knows me, I'm a spreadsheet crazy automation guy. Right? That's my mastermind group I run, tried having a meeting with me to get me over my spreadsheet automation. There's no way to do it that I've ever found, right? Tax lien sales, delinquent taxes, the county's website may be, if it's online, may be wrong, right? Call the county. Has this been tax sale? right? Is there other things on here? Has been sold tax sale, right? And generally, these county record people are really nice. They're actually friendly, right? Call them up, ask them, right? It's difficult. Tax liens and delinquent taxes is something we all play with. That doesn't matter to us. Why does it matter? Because it's owed. It's on the top of the line because it's owed to us, right? So there's no way to easily get your delinquent tax number without calling someone or verifying it, right? Unless they can see the fact that they've been paying forever. Some counties show you who paid the bill, right? They'll show you, paid by John Smith, John Smith, John Smith, which is great. That tells me that the loan, when it was paid and who paid it. Most of the time, if it's escrowed, it will show the service man, because that's who actually paid the bill. Cool question. I know we got some more questions out there. Who else? Delinquent question. If you bought anything or you're looking to sell, what due diligence do you want to know from the investor side what we're going to look for? Because if it's performing, for partial or not, you have your returns. Each state's different, but I'm going to tell you now, know your returns, because it doesn't matter what state it is, because if your desired return is what it is, everything backs into it. All right? What other questions we got? What other due diligence have we got stuck with or curiosity about? Because it's very, very confusing.
So you mentioned buying loans from loan originators. Do you find that to be a little easier for you because a lot of the legwork and stuff is done by them prior to originating that loan?
I would say that most loans we buy are originated by somebody else. We're not originating ourselves, right? So if it's originated by a bank or originator, it doesn't really matter. However, if it's originated by a private investor, it's a little bit more of a hurdle because I got to make sure that that paperwork's legit, right? Is it RMLO? Has it been approved? Is it Dodd-Frank compliant? All this stuff. And what was the loan for? What was the property involved? Is it legitimately foreclosable? The other problem of buying with private investors, and we all laugh about this, is for some reason, some people are just not sophisticated enough and they write the payment amount and date on an envelope and they take a picture of the money and that's their payment history. And I don't know how to use that in court, right? A payment date on an envelope doesn't tell me anything. It's so hard. And your servicer may kick it back. So that's the only problem with buying from seller finance is that if they're mom and pop, they may not have a system, right? I run into a lot of people who are older and say, listen, I have it on a letter. It's written down. That doesn't work for me. Well, I have it on a spreadsheet. Okay. But I need to verify. I need to make sure the borrower says, I didn't make that. I made more payments than that. How do I verify? So that's the frustrating part. So if you're originating, I would encourage you to have some kind of system that is provable in court. That's the biggest thing for me, legal. Because if I have to foreclose on it, I need to make sure that I can foreclose on that file. Because at the end of the day, that's my worst case scenario. If it performs and they pay it off, I don't care. But that's not what I'm worried about. That's not what we sleep over, right? The modification of the agreement. Okay.
In your experience, what's the situation, most common situations when it's actually not foreclosable?
So not foreclosable could mean the fact that there's anything missing in the collateral file, assignment or a launch that cannot be fixed for some reason, right? And in certain states, you can do certain things to alleviate that problem, right? Some states don't allow it. Those situations where, like in PA, an affidavit doesn't work, they won't allow it. So what you often have to do is get the borrower to agree to the default amount. But if they're not performing, do you think they're going to agree to the amount owed? Probably not. So those kind of situations. There are legal ways of doing it, and what I often do is reach out to my attorney and say, hey, is there a way we can fix this, right? If I can't think of it, I reach out to my attorney friends. Again, I stay in my lane, right? I don't become an expert in everything, I become an expert in what I do. And let my people do it. I pay them to be experts. I pay myself to be an expert, I pay them to be experts. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
What would you say a reasonable rate of return would be on a non-performing loan that you would expect to make?
So, for me, I have a stair step, right? If the property is worth, say, 50 to 100, if it's worth 100 to 150, depending on the price, right? And if it's going to go to auction or not. So my numbers all vary. So I also have the time frame in there. So you're gonna shoot target for a certain dollar amount. But understand with non-performing, there's a lot of variables you don't know. Can testament, value of the property, rehab, sell at auction, not sell at auction, all these variables at play where performing is a little bit different. So you want to shoot for 15 plus, right? Right now it's extremely hard to buy non-performing, just the things are high, right? What we're seeing now is that's going to start turning. Why? Rates are going up. This stuff's starting to break open. And with the rate going up again, last week, it's going to get really interesting what's going to happen here. Because if that's the case, your returns are going to go up, right? And you're going to target stuff. The problem is targeting any number we're not performing with so many variables, it is so hard to hit exactly a number. But you want to target something where at the end of the day, my net number is this. So you're performing maybe 10, maybe your non-performing is 20 to be careful. But again, my 20, your 20 may be completely different because of the variables in play. Are you including things like your servicing fee every month? Are you including things like your insurance, right? Forced place insurance. If the borrower is not paying the bill, there's no insurance on there. Do you file forced place insurance? Do you not put forced place insurance on? That's just insurance to protect the property from the lender point of view, right? If you're going to sell it, what's your commission to the agent you're going to sell it for? Another variable in there, that kind of stuff. Someone else had a question. Go ahead.
Some performing note buyers want to, the first thing they want to check is the credit of the borrower. If all you've provided them is the name of the borrower, how can they check the credit?
So, I'm going to tell you from the first space, I don't care about someone's credit. But, let's flip it to the second space. They care more about the borrower's credit, right? From the first space, as an individual investor, I'm after the property. If they don't perform, I don't care. I'm going to foreclose. My projection is different. You know, FINRA does a little different thing where they do. Every investor does it differently. Some people pull the credit report. I don't bother. Why? I don't care if they pay or not. I'm up to the property and know the value. But for a credit report, you need to know the person. John Smith is a great name to have to find their credit history, right? You need to find a social security number, right? You need to get that from the seller, right? It's extremely hard to do anything else than that. So typically, if I bought loans when I bought seconds, the seller would provide me that social security number to pull the credit report, and it's a soft hit. It's just to find out what's on there. That makes sense? Good.
Yeah, but I've never provided that number. And from the name, they can look it up somehow. So that's what.
There are ways, but the problem is how common the name is. The name is uncommon, and I know where they live. I can typically find out who they are, right? But if it's a common name, I don't know a way to easily find that credit report on John Smith in Orlando, Florida, right? I don't know of a way, to be honest with you. Good question.
They still come back and say, no, we've looked this credit up.
So know the fact that in big institutions, they're going to want more files. They're going to want the entire origination file, which is a HUD and everything else, right? And typically in there is a social security number as well. So it's hard.
Do you have a recommended source, or which would you want the source to go and do a soft credit?
So there's a couple of people out there. Me personally, you can go to your servicer, right? That's where I typically pull my credit reports. Again, in first base, I don't typically pull credit reports because again, I don't care with the borrower. But you can go to your servicer; they'll pull the soft on you. Most servicers have no problem doing it. But I don't really pull credit reports because I don't care. But yeah, you can pull credit reports from a couple different sources out there. So I can give you some sources, generally speaking, that I've pulled for in the past. I haven't pulled a credit report in 4 years, maybe. I just don't bother. Not part of my process. Any other questions, curiosity, wonders? Because due diligence is a field that once you dive in, you feel like you're in a deep swimming pool and you don't know where to turn, right? It's much better to get a file in your hand and have somebody walk you through things and have a checklist, right? So a checklist is good. However, one of the checklists is review your cloud file. What does that mean, right? Knowing your numbers is a big thing about this. So what we do oftentimes is in our Facebook group, we have a webinar. And the webinars talk about different topics and this kind of thing, right? I can spend hours on due diligence in the collateral file, right? But we talked yesterday, every single deal you do will be different. Every due diligence step may not be the same, right? If the O&E is done by origination, what am I gonna look at? I don't care if it takes assignment chain, because there isn't one assignment chain. Typically the seller's like, what do you mean a silent mortgage? What is that, right? They'll say to us, well, what do you need as a note buyer? I need numbers. I need to make sure it's originated correctly, right? You're There's a place called Call the Underwriter for those who do originate notes, who do nationwide origination. Right? We did a webinar with them. They can do it any state and they can do it quickly. Real easy, do the whole background check and originate notes for you anywhere in the country. Originated by them, no problem. We'll move on from there. If the cloud's fine, we'll move on from there. So that's part of it. So, go ahead. Cool. So one of the pieces in due diligence, what we often do, is your bid calculator. I want to dive into just a minute about bid calculations. So your bid calculations for us is determining the fact that if it's a non-performer, what's my cost for non-performing? Every state has a cost. Next, your servicer. Every servicer fee chart is different from each other. One servicer may charge $20 for performing, one may charge $30, one may charge $60. Some servicers don't care if you're performing or not, they charge $95, right? Every servicer is made different. You have more of the bigger ones who are different. You have the more, ones that are small, which you can work with better. There's some servicers who have REO in-house. So if you do foreclosure, they have an attorney on staff, they have everything there for you. However, as you get more sophisticated, they'll tell you, you cannot work with your attorney, it must go through us. I don't do that, I don't like that, I talk to my attorney myself, I'll send you the invoices that we bill to it, but let me talk to my attorney. But depending on what level you're at, depends on what service you want. And the services just vary on what states you're licensed in and how much level of care or service they provide to you. I'm gonna tell you right now, that does not matter what service you work with, they will not be as caring about your note as you are. These people have hundreds of loans in their name, they literally have to manage. So if you think your loan matters to them, it doesn't, right? They still get a paycheck. So you need to know the fact that you need to manage them and reach out to them. Attorney, same thing. Put your time clock out there. Put your time frame on the fact of where you're at. So with my due diligence numbers, my bid calculator will show me my different exit strategies. So I can go through 18, 20 different exit strategies. That's one thing about notes is really cool. With due diligence, I can foreclose and rent. I can foreclose and sell. I can perform and sell partial and go buy another note, right? I can sell one partial and then 2 years later sell another partial, recoup money. There's so many different exit strategies. Another thing with the bid calculator you want to look at is which state it's in for your statute of limitations, your free legal fees, but also the fact that what the rules and regs to sell a note is. New York is a pain in the butt with REOs, right? It is. PA is getting worse as well. So you start avoiding different areas. Word of the wise, you're gonna hear from a lot of people, do not buy Cook County, Illinois, or the 5 boroughs of New York, right? Gary, Indiana is one of the most common things we saw back in 2011 is like, what happened to Detroit? Gary, Indiana is like the new Detroit, right? You can buy a whole block for $5. But Cook County, it's just a long foreclosure state. It's just not fun. I've heard people take, not encouraging it, dogs, put in the house, feed the dogs, and it keep people out of it. Because certain states, if the person moves into the house, even if they're just squatting, they become a tenant. They have tenant rights. What it is. Yeah, fun stuff. So Cook County is a problem. 5 boroughs is getting better, but they just long foreclosure period. And if you have long foreclosure period, it extends your deal. Okay. Any other question about this? I kind of went overall, and believe me, my due diligence is a lot longer than this because it just is. But each deal is different. I reach out to my attorneys. What I do is I mass email my agents based on longitude, latitude to all my REO agents that I have local. Reach out to my investor friends and do that. That's huge. That's why networking, these events, social media is big, right? I don't trust BPM for that reason, because I can find someone local who's an expert, and I'd rather trust them, someone that just pulls up numbers. Cool. All right. Any other questions, curiosities? I'll be around, of course, through tomorrow and all that stuff. If you ever want to reach out to me, we have a Facebook group, YouTube channel, LinkedIn. We have all kinds of stuff like that. We have webinars. Nathan Turner and myself run a bi-weekly webinar on different topics, from new investors to experience to professionals, all kinds of stuff. We get all kinds of different topics. We also bring in people who are no experienced people to see just how many different angles. We all do things differently. We're all doing the same job in a different manner. You're gonna find people in the space that you connect with. I would encourage you to talk to everyone, because everyone has a different perspective. We all do things a little bit different than anyone else. Cool. Any other final questions, curiosities? Anything else? No? Awesome. Feel free to reach